Hi, welcome to the Kevin Mannix Report. I'm Kevin Mannix, your host for this program, which is designed to give all of us a little more insight into what goes on in and about government, both at the local and at the state level. Our guest today is a gentleman who is very heavily involved in our lives on behalf of public safety in Marion County. He is the sheriff of Marion County, Ramirez. Welcome to the Kevin Mannix Report, Sheriff.
Thank you.
What we try to do on this program is give folks a chance to learn a little bit about individuals who are in important positions involved in government, but also to hear about policy and philosophy. But at the outset, I always like to ask a little bit about the individual person's background. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you went to school, that kind of thing?
All right. Well, my family is from Texas, and that's where I was born. About 100 miles south of San Antonio. So I lived in a rural setting as well as in Dallas, Texas, which was a substantially large city. Our move to Oregon was basically, it was my father's decision that he wanted to take us out of that environment and put us into a working environment, which brought us to Oregon. They used to be migrant farm workers following the crops. And Oregon happened to be one of those states where they would come to work. They liked Oregon, and as a result, we moved here permanently in 1964. So I've been in Oregon for 36 years. Both my parents were farm workers. I have 5 younger brothers who are in different professions. I have 6 children. Altogether, one of the unique things about our family is the fact that my parents named all the boys with their first names with the letter R, so we're all RRs, and we just continued on that family tradition. So now out of 35 relatives, 31 are with the letter R, so it becomes confusing at family gatherings.
I said 36 years ago, you've got the roots here in Oregon.
Yes.
I always like to say for myself that while I was born in New York, that I'm an adoptive Oregonian, and then my 3 kids were born in Oregon, so now I'm bound to the state after 25 years. But the family having come here 36 years ago, you're probably in your 40s. So were you a kid at the time?
Yes, I was 13 years old when
What was it like coming to Oregon back then?
It was a culture shock for me, never having been in such a rural setting. I had never lived in a migrant camp until we moved actually to Oregon, because we had housing in our small hometown in Texas, so migrant camps to me were foreign, and so it was a culture shock of living in a migrant camp, and it was also a culture shock with some of the racial problems that I ran into up here. But the quality of life, Oregon, I mean, I'm an Oregonian just like you. All of my children are Oregonians, and I love Oregon.
Well, that's one of the things that we're beginning to, I think, understand a little bit more. When you talk about coming here from Texas, you already had your American roots, but people start thinking of everyone here of any kind of Hispanic origin as being necessarily from Mexico, and even that is wrong, because actually we have folks from Central America who are immigrants too. Right. And we're also looking now at additional generations down the pike. My associate is Japanese American, but she is not, obviously born in Japan. She was born here, and so one of the transitions we're seeing is a shift in generations. And I'm actually Irish American, so I mean, my dad was the first generation born in the United States, but Oregonians don't always think about that.
That's true.
We are a nation of immigrants, other than the Native Americans, and they probably came here, I don't know which way, whether it was across the Alaskan Siberian Bridge or whatever. Right. We could always talk about migration. But I'd like to bring it around to your atmosphere growing up here in the 60s. You went to school in this area?
Yes. Actually, it was, I went to North Marion School District, and the reason I say that, I went to elementary and a junior high, and then halfway through my 8th grade, I transferred to Woodburn. So I've been at North Marion and went through the Woodburn high school system.
Now, at what point did you decide to move into public safety?
Well, it was I never really had this as a focus as a career growing up. Law enforcement was not a friend of the Hispanic community, and so law enforcement was not a career goal for me. Teaching and coaching were my career aspirations. What changed me was my senior year in high school, when the local police chief came to the high school and basically recruited me. I didn't know that that's what he was doing, but I got called to the principal's office, and he says, the chief wants to talk to police chief. And I go, I didn't do it. And so he was extending his outreach to me, and as a result of that outreach, he invited me down to the police department. He really captured my interest in what public safety or law enforcement was all about. I had a misperception of what law enforcement was about, and he changed that for me. So I became Woodburn's first police cadet and a part-time dispatcher my senior year in high school, and that's where I changed career tracks that I wanted to pursue a law enforcement career.
And that you've been pursuing that ever since?
Yes. I worked 2 years as a juvenile probation counselor here in Marion County, and I've been with the Sheriff's Office. This July will be 25 years.
Now, you ran for election last time. It was a contested race.
Yes.
And you were elected sheriff of Marion County. How does it feel to be the chief law enforcement officer for the county?
Well, it's a lot of responsibility. I'm very honored that I'm in this position. One of the things that I looked at was, prior to running, was my involvement in the community, my commitment to the community, and that I could make a difference in this particular position, being the chief law enforcement executive of the county. And I've always worked around partnership and collaboration, and it just seemed to be a fit. And it's a profession that I'm committed to.
Well, one of the changes we've seen in law enforcement, I think, in the last 25 years is in the 60s and 70s, there was not necessarily in what I'll call the Hispanic community, that's sort of a generic term, but communities generally, there was some resistance to law enforcement. Maybe it was the anti-war attitude against the military flowing over. But I've at least perceived a change where in the last 10 to 15 years, folks have warmed up and understood that law enforcement is there as the friend of the community, not the foe. What's your perception on that?
Well, I've noticed that what I would describe being a minority within a minority profession, law enforcement. When we look at community conflict, community relations between law enforcement and the community, yes, there were some significant challenges over the years, from the 60s, 70s, through the 80s. And for about the last 15 years, I've been actively involved in mediating and providing some facilitation around community relations between law enforcement agencies throughout Oregon and into the state of Washington. I've worked with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Community Relations Service, around those pieces of how can we impart and leave tools with communities to be able to address those issues and basically fill the gap that exists out there. And it's a lack of information, a lack of understanding on both sides, both the community and law enforcement, of how to live together in a community. And it's through those efforts that I think have paid off over the long run. We've put together a couple of conferences, what I would describe leadership symposiums around community relations, to bring all of the key players in a community together to have a better understanding of how they need to work together.
I've got to ask you an accent question. You do not have, I have a friend who talks like this,
right,
who's
right.
from Texas. You don't have that Texas accent. How'd you manage to avoid that?
Probably because I have web feet now as an Oregonian. I don't know. You know, I'm told I have a little slight accent, but
a little twang.
I don't notice it. You know, it's kind of funny. You know, you ask about accents. I have a lot of cousins in Texas that have that southern drawl, and it's kind of interesting when you talk about languages. I'll talk to my cousins over the phone in English, and I mean they've got that southern twang, etc. But when we convert to Spanish, when I'm talking to them in Spanish, there is no accent. And so that's kind of an interesting point with regards to communication of how they incorporate accent in English and none in Spanish.
Well, I left New York when I was 5 years old, but when I go back there to visit relatives, if I'm there for more than a few days, I can't do it now, right, but I start sounding more like a New Yorker. Even you sort of revert a little bit, but your environment can affect that. Right. But I guess I left young enough that I wasn't permanently affected with a New York accent. Well, I was just curious about that because Kevin Crawford, who was one of my partners-in-law, came here from Texas about 3 years ago, and he definitely has that Texas sound. Well, in terms of working with the community and in terms of the sheriff's role, a lot of people may not understand. They think of the sheriff as, well, you've got deputies and you go out and arrest people. But you actually have got a whole community correction system and the jail system all under your bailiwick. Can you explain for the folks what the sheriff's job is all about, really, the jurisdiction?
Okay. As far as the mandates for the office of sheriff, the sheriff is responsible for maintaining and operating the jail, managing and operating the jail facility. Also, court security, which means having deputies inside the courthouse when there's court proceedings, depending on what the needs are. Prisoner transport, providing services to transporting prisoners from the jail setting, or it could be Department of Corrections settings, to court hearings, and providing security at the courthouse and transporting them back. Another additional responsibility is civil process, and that is where we serve civil papers such as witness subpoenas to whoever. Any document coming from the court will basically outline that the circuit court orders the sheriff to do so and so. And so we have to follow that court order mandated by the courts. The other area of responsibility that is inherent to the sheriff is search and rescue within the county. So anyone becoming lost in the wilderness or wherever, we are the ones that are to coordinate that search and bring resources to that particular operation. And how do you plan for that, when you think about, the overall schemes of search and rescue? Now, one of the things that we have unique within our sheriff's office, which is a little bit different than any other sheriff's office in the state, and for that matter, in the country, is that we have the whole continuum of criminal justice. And by that I mean that we deal with the community from the very first point of contact, whether it's a crime prevention meeting or we stop somebody on a traffic stop. And then if we have to take any action, issue a citation, make an arrest, then that individual might end up in jail. So I'm also responsible for that. Now, after they're released from jail, the other component that had not been under the sheriff's office was community corrections, or our parole and probation officers. They now are under the sheriff's office. So now we can look at the whole continuum as an agency and be able to make policy decisions based on what is the best outcome based on our resources and what we're trying to accomplish. So from just a real quick snapshot, it's prevention, enforcement, court security at the jail, jail operations, and then parole and probation management of offenders.
Now, in terms of the jail system, traditionally the county jail is there for the misdemeanors, although you now also get well, you've always gotten all the pretrial incarceration. You also get the felons under what's called Senate Bill 1145, who get less than a year in the state sentencing system for felonies. The state prison system gets felons who get 12 months or over 12 months incarceration. Right. So you've got quite a group of people to deal with, and there's issues then about resources and trying to deal with all of that. How are you trying to accommodate these resource issues at the county level and in relation to the state?
Well, when we look at the makeup of our jail population, certainly you mentioned 1145, those are state prisoners. We average anywhere from about 120 to 140 at one time within the facility. Those particular prisoners, those positions are funded through the state of Oregon. When you look at the total capacity, so if we have 120, 140 within the capacity level, right now we're at 528 beds at the Marion County Jail. In addition to that, we also have a work center, 144 beds. So combining those two facilities, we're the second largest jail in the state behind Multnomah County. It's unfortunate that we have those kind of numbers driving the needs for our community, but certainly the funding base is a key piece when we look at public safety within the community. If you don't have the ability to have a sanction incarceration, it really compromises not only public safety but also the criminal justice procedure.
Well, one of the things that we would want to talk about too, and how this all fits together, is the cities. Many of the cities have their own police departments. And so how does that fit in with the Sheriff's Department and your operation? Say you've got the Woodburn City Police, the Kaiser City Police, the Salem Police. Their specific law enforcement functions seem to be narrower and more aimed at, well, community work, of course, community policing, but they're there to apprehend people. They don't deal with the incarceration and the probation and supervision. Can you talk about the interaction with the police departments from your perspective?
Well, we have a good interaction. We meet monthly as police administrators, all the police chiefs, the sheriff, and the district attorney, to talk about issues that are of common concern or common goals within public safety. But certainly the difference in duties and responsibilities, there is more of an emphasis on sheriff's deputies to have a broader background with regards to what they're expected to perform. If you would take a city police officer, he has to be out there patrolling, working with community groups on prevention, intervention, but the ultimate end is that he'll take some enforcement action, whether it's on crimes or traffic issues. Whereas a patrol deputy, he or she is required not only to perform those duties, but also, again, when it becomes a search and rescue operation, they've got to be ready to respond to that wherever. When it comes to courtroom security and transporting prisoners, they can be called upon to do that. Civil process, in addition to doing their patrol duties, being out there serving civil papers within their scope. So it's a very comprehensive and broad responsibility for deputy sheriffs in comparisons to a city police officer. But the cooperation is there at any level. We recognize that if we don't work together, that's going to be at the expense of the public, and so we make every effort to work together.
I'm going to pause for a moment and mention to our audience that you are with us on the Kevin Mannix Report. Our guest today is Sheriff Raul Ramirez from Marion County. We've been talking about a variety of public safety issues relating to Marion County, which also really relate to the rest of the state, too. If you ever have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me at the Kevin Mannix Report. You can write to me at 2003 State Street, Salem, Oregon, 97301, or you can reach me by email at kevin@mannix.com. Again, it's kevin@mannix.com, or you can phone my office at 503-364-1913. That's a local call for the Salem area, but it would be long distance in the rest of the state, and again, that's 503-364-1913. We're always happy to hear from you. And let's return now to our guest for this program, Sheriff Ramirez. The discussion we just had about cooperation with city police, there's another police entity that people hear about, which is the Oregon State Police. And in Oregon, they have general jurisdiction, but of course, they're also spread all over the state, and they have specific functions such as a crime lab, and then they have some specific enforcement teams. But how does that all fit in with the Sheriff's Department operation in Marion County when you deal with the state police?
Well, we certainly look to state police for forensics assistance, the crime lab, latent print lab, etc. That's an area that we heavily rely on state police, and we support state police in that endeavor. As far as working out, patrolling within the counties, within our county, we have already established what we refer to as crime prevention partners out in our communities. We have about 175 what we describe as block captains, and these are individuals that are liaisons, leaders in their own neighborhoods to work with us on crime prevention issues. So we're pretty well connected there in that particular piece. Then we looked at state police to being able to patrol the state highways and then provide backup assistance to us, and then we also mutually return the same assistance when they need backup or any assistance.
The focus, it would seem, on the patrol function, that would be, for instance, in Marion County, the state highways. Yes. And some cooperation. Do you talk to them about how they try to schedule the state police patrols that do occur across Marion County?
We do work on coordinating patrol schedules, so we have our resources spread out so there's adequate coverage across the county.
Now, we do have some debate that goes on at the state level about state funding additional troopers as opposed to, say, grants to sheriffs or police departments to provide additional patrol functions. That's an esoteric, difficult issue to deal with, but it seems the sheriffs are coming across with the point that at some point, as we continue to fund additional law enforcement, the state could be providing additional assistance to sheriffs, too, that they can get deputies on the road and provide more localized assistance if the state would simply get into that business. Do you have a particular perspective on that?
Well, as I pointed out earlier with regards to the roles and duties that a deputy sheriff has to provide are more comprehensive than a state trooper or a city police officer. So you already have personnel that have a broad range of skills to provide a response to those needs in the community, and certainly where we do need to continue beefing up with state police is in the forensic unit. That's kind of our support base for all law enforcement in the state. As far as the state highways, the resources need to be devoted to patrolling those particular areas. In the past, what we've run into statistically with regards to motor vehicle accidents, both injury and non-injury, that sheriff's offices, or at least I can speak for ours, probably about 85 to 90% of all motor vehicle accidents occurring on state and county roads were handled by the sheriff's office. So those are some of the things that we need to look at, of having law enforcement resources to respond to whatever the situation is.
And you're being very diplomatic. There's always going to be some tension in terms of where the funds come from. Not within the county, because the county is dealing with the sheriff's department and the cities are dealing with their police departments. But to the extent we're going to try to get the state to help law enforcement, the sheriffs and the chiefs of police have been making the point, hey, you know, help us too.
Right.
Well, as far as the future direction, I've noticed that you've been working a lot with youth-related programs, both on the prevention side, but also on the Get Tough side as far as gangs go. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, certainly with my prior involvement with the juvenile department, I've developed an understanding and appreciation for youth, families' issues in the county. And throughout my career, have tried to maintain some level of involvement on youth-related issues, community issues. I've seen this phenomena of, again, I mentioned earlier about not having the ability for sanctions within the adult system, but it also relates to the juvenile system. If you don't have sanctions such as enough juvenile beds, youth out in the community recognize, go ahead, you know, I've committed 5 burglaries, arrest me, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to be incarcerated. So those are the issues that we need to look at as a community as to what's impacting our youth and our families. And I can't just let all of that just rest on juveniles when we talk about community problems. Adults have to take some responsibility for what's taking place in our communities. And so often it's, well, let's develop intervention, prevention programs for youth, but yet on the other side of the coin, what are we doing to enhance parenting classes, parenting skills? Because there's a lot of folks out there that need that type of assistance. And so often the emphasis, well, it's the child, let's give them the information, but yet mom and dad are not prepared to deal with it. From the prevention piece, we've gone into the suppression or the enforcement piece when we talk about youth violence. Over the last 15 years, we've had a presence of gang activity throughout Marion County and gang violence. The early part of 1988, we started to experience an upward surge of high violence, homicides, shootings, drive-bys, people getting injured, that I met with Salem Police Chief Walt Myers to talk about what kind of strategies are we going to develop to deal with this issue, and this was early in '98, that by all numbers, we're going to supersede 1997 at the rate we're going. And sure enough, 1998 was a record year, unfortunately, for crime, for youth gang violence in Marion County. Chief Myers and I put together an interagency gang enforcement team composed of Salem PD, the Sheriff's Office, Juvenile Department, the District Attorney's Office, State Police, and Kaiser Police Department. And as a result of working with community leaders, we moved to an enforcement or suppression mode of targeting gang violence and gangsters. As a result of our work over those last 18 months, we've turned, I guess, the majority of that violence around. In 1998, we had somewhere around 613 gang-related crimes This year we were up around 380 some crimes, a reduction of 37%.
That was for 99?
Yes, for
down
99.
37%.
Reduction of by 37%. In 1998 we had 5 homicides. In 1999, 0, 100% reduction. In
Can't do any better than that.
1998 we had 18 individuals that were injured by gunfire, gang-related gunfire. In 1999, we had 1, and I believe that's a 97% reduction. And then in the area of drive-by shootings, in 1998 we had 76. In 1999, we only had 10. So significant changes, but again, it's not just to the credit of the interagency team. It's about working with school personnel, with community leaders, with the faith community. It's an ongoing struggle and battle, and we're not going to, just stand by on our laurels with regards to what has been turned around, but we need to continue working and continue to stay committed to that effort.
But the good news is that you've made great progress. That is, you've demonstrated that the community can reduce crime and do not just in what I'll call the reactive mode, but also when it comes to violent crime, yes, suppression.
Right.
Have it not happen. Don't just deal with accountability after the fact. Prevent it from happening and move on to deal with, let's get kids out of these circumstances in the first place. And it sounds like all of that ties together in a real matrix of efforts at the community level.
Yes, it does.
One of the things the legislature was debating last session with Senate Bill 555, which was the juvenile director's funding package, was this debate about prevention versus apprehension versus rehabilitation. It seemed to me that a lot of folks in some of these policy discussions were missing the boat in the sense that all of this stuff tied together, and it can't be an either-or proposition. Would it be fair to say that Marion County is a good demonstration of what this more holistic, comprehensive approach is all about?
I would say so, especially where you involve all of the entities within the county, and it's not just public safety, it's the communities, the educational community, faith community. Yes.
And it sounds like, well, it's no more than sounds like, it's pretty clear that that kind of comprehensive approach makes a big difference.
It's a good model to work off of.
Well, have you had some surprises in being sheriff? I mean, you ran for sheriff, you were elected, and you go into office. I'm always curious as to whether or not there were some things that are really different from what you expected. This is a positive or a negative surprise. Any surprises for you when you became sheriff about the role or the office?
Not really. And I guess the reason I say that is no one leader, administrator, CEO can make things happen in an organization. It has to be a team effort, and within your executive team, your command team, that's where it happens. You pick individuals that will demonstrate leadership ability and skills to make those things happen, and collectively as a team. And that's why I've always operated in a team approach rather than being autocratic, this is the way it's going to be done. So sometimes I do take that posture at times, but we problem solve collectively as a team.
All right, well then, you're the team leader for public safety in Marion County in many ways. I have to cut you off at that point since our time is up, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I thank our audience for joining us on the Kevin Mannix Report. Our guest today has been Sheriff Raul Ramirez from Marion County. Take care.